So, do we have a deal, Ant-Man? Whoa, I think you're confusing me with somebody else. Are you the one with the hammer? Steel? You know what, just forget the whole thing. Welcome to 5 Points of Articulation, where I review action figures and then articulate 5 points to help you decide if you want to add that figure to your collection. The 5 points I discuss are packaging, presentation, posability, playability, and price. I'm Jason, and if you enjoy my content, please like, share, subscribe, do all the YouTube rigmarole. Today, I'm capitalizing on search engine optimization for Ant-Man the Wasp Quantumania. What I mean to say is I'm taking a very coincidentally timed, long overdue look at the Page Puncher's Atom. Starting off with the packaging, and there's some changes since the last time we looked at the Page Punchers. The name of the character is a lot bigger and splashier, and instead of a costly sticker, the comic book information is now in the top corner. On the side, we can see this is the Atom from the Flash comic. You know, the Flash comic? Sorry, I meant the Flash trademark comic trademark. Specifically, the Flash comic included with this figure. It features all the characters in this wave: the Flash, Captain Cold, Heatwave, the Atom that we're looking at today, and the Gorilla Grodd Megafig. Pic of the Atom on the side, more information about the comic, and my usual reminder that this is released under DC Direct. It's meant to evoke those boxes, and I think it does a great job. For packaging, I'm giving the Atom 1 whole point. Moving on to presentation, and the Atom stands at just about 7 inches on the dot. You might be wondering which came first, the Atom or Ant-Man. Strictly speaking, a version of the Atom dates back to the golden age of comics in the 1940s. That character, however, did not have the ability to shrink himself. Instead, he had an atomic punch. The shrinking Atom that we're all familiar with didn't appear until 1961, with Ant-Man first appearing in Tales to Astonish comics in 1962. So, was Ant-Man a ripoff of the Atom, or were both the result of parallel thought? Near as I can tell, nobody ever sued each other over it, which is pretty revealing, but it's worth noting that both characters were probably inspired by the 1958 film The Incredible Shrinking Man. In fact, 3 years later, in 1965, Atom and Ant-Man came together and had a baby. Adamant. Thank you, I'll be here all week. When I first saw this figure, it was as a leaked image, and I thought to myself, there's no way this is the finished product. The bright blue hunks of red and blue plastic with no painted detail, not even pupils? I'll also admit ignorance that the costume wasn't familiar to me. At the time, I didn't realize it was based off his Rebirth design. With that in mind, the costume is a fair approximation. I still think it could use a bit more black in some spots to create some contrast, but the gist of it's there, and credit where it's due, they did paint some black on the back, which they could have easily cheaped out on. And the more I looked at it, the more impressed I was with all the different panel lines. Getting it in hand, and I realized that these legs aren't painted. These are red sections and blue sections put together. I also really came to appreciate just what a good job McFarlane did integrating the joints. Most especially the diaphragm and waist, which are notorious ongoing issues. I also appreciate that they did paint an Atom on his belt buckle, as well as the front of the helmet. But then we get to the rest of the head. First, let me say that I like the sculpt on the hoses, as well as the transparent faceplate. The face, however, looks nothing like Ryan Choi, and honestly, kinda looks like Todd McFarlane. Again! Not only does Ryan most definitely have pupils, he also wears glasses underneath the helmet. Now, it could be argued that he doesn't have pupils in the comic that accompanies this figure, but he does have eyebrows. I'm also noticing that a big part of the problem with mine anyway is that the eyes are stamped on a bit too high. It's a bit of a catch-22. On the one hand, I love the transparent dome, but on the other hand, because of that transparent dome, I can't repaint the face. In terms of basic sculpting, this figure is pretty solid. There's lots of great panel lines and texture, and for the most part, it does look like he stepped out of a Rebirth comic. The two biggest issues are a lack of paint to accentuate that detail, but most egregiously, a completely inaccurate face sculpt. For presentation, I'm giving this half-sized hero half a point. Moving on to posability, and Ryan's pretty much what we've come to expect. His head's in a dumbbell joint. Despite the hoses, he can look up this high and down this far. There is tilt, but it's a bit stiff, and while he can't look all the way around, he can look side to side. Moving on down, his arms can raise over 90 degrees, fantastic range in the rotator cuff, bicep swivel, double jointed elbows, and the new and improved McFarlane wrist balls very nicely integrated into the sculpt. Moving to the middle, and once again, he has a diaphragm joint and a dumbbell waist. He can arch back this far, and as is par for the course, he can only hunch forward this far. He does, however, get a great amount of tilt and twist. Below the size altering belt, and the Atom has the typical McFarlane hips. He can kick this high and do a perfect split. Bit of twist at the hip, double jointed knees with some very unfortunate blue pins, toticulation, and McFarlane ankle balls that can swivel, hinge, and pivot. With the exception of the front-facing diaphragm joint, I'm pretty pleased with how flexible this figure is. I was particularly surprised by how movable the head was given those hard plastic hoses. Most importantly, I'm just really impressed with how well integrated the articulation is into the sculpt. For posability, I'm giving the Atom 1 whole point. Moving on to playability, and in addition to a figure stand, the Atom comes with a trading card, pause here if you want to read it, and a comic book. It might say 1 in the corner, but don't be fooled. This is the only one, and every figure in the wave comes with it. Every figure in the wave also comes with the same trading card, minus the bio. To McFarlane's credit, I do see that moving forward, the different characters in the wave will have different covers, and therefore different cards, but what I would love to see is for each character to come with their own comic. I'm familiar with Ryan Choi, but not the Rebirth version of him. If this figure came with a reprint of Rebirth Atom #1, maybe I would have liked it enough to start buying more comics. And hey, if they could base these on 4-issue miniseries, then each figure in the wave would become essential. It would also have to be cheaper than hiring writers and artists to create all new content. Luckily for Ryan, there is more in the box. In addition to a weapon-holding hand and a fist, the Atom also comes with 2 open hands. That's a really nice surprise. He also comes with a ring effect for when he's shrinking. Note the peg here and the hole here. A double would have been nice, but this does still add a little something. And speaking of a little something, what I really wish he came with was a miniature version of himself. Similar to this puppet version of Freddy from Nightmare on Elm Street 3, it could have been an inch or 2 tall and essentially life-sized. Just imagine all the places you could have put him.
I need both hands, Professor Palmer.
Lucky son of a... But playability is more than just being jealous of cartoon characters. It's also about how well your figure plays with others. For some other page punchers, here we have Black Adam. Immediately we can see improvement in the proportions. Here's Constantine with his long gangly arms, Liber Miho Batman, Injustice 2 Batman, and Superman. Speaking of Superman, for more members of the Justice League, and here we have the Action Comics 1000 version. Since it's a Rebirth Atom, here's the Rebirth Superman, and here's Angry Laser Eyes Hush. Speaking of Hush, my Blue Hush Batman pre-order has not come yet, but here we have the ever-popular 3 Jokers version. And again, since it's Rebirth, here's Rebirth Batman. Here's Rebirth Flash, Rebirth Aquaman, Rebirth Martian Manhunter, and as much as I'd love to show you a Rebirth McFarlane Wonder Woman, I still can't. Here's a DC Essentials one, though. On the subject of DC Essentials, though, and here we have a DC Essentials Green Lantern and the DC Multiverse. For a relative scale comparison, as well as a red and blue smorgasbord, here's Pizza Spidey and the Spectacular Spider-Man, and as always, here's the Atom with Stealth Iron Man. Aw man, even the Atom is bigger than me. At a time when it feels like action figure companies are giving us less and less, even 3 accessories feels almost like we're being spoiled. I still wish that one of those accessories was an even smaller version of the Atom, but what we do have is still a lot of fun on its own. For playability, I'm giving the Atom 1 whole point. Hey, look at me, I'm Aquaman! This leaves us with nothing left to discuss but the price. As a page puncher, the Atom retails for $24.99. Again, the only reason for that extra $5 is the comic. If this was a single carded release for $20, I'd say it was a really good deal, but $25 a figure for 4 copies of the same comic is hardly a small price to pay. For price, I'm giving the Atom half a point for a grand total of 4 out of 5. You might say I've come up short. If you like this video, check out one of these. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back again real soon, but until then, play nice and have fun.